afternoon, all, and a very warm welcome to Smarter Conversations, a knowledge led webinar series presented by Magnelis and AMNS India. Smarter Conversations is built on a simple yet powerful belief that meaningful insights can shape better decisions and inspired ideas can build a more sustainable future. Through this platform, we bring together industry leaders, innovators, and thinkers to explore the forces transforming the built environment and infrastructure landscape. Today's session is especially timely as India and the world accelerate towards cleaner energy systems and resilient infrastructure. Our topic for webinar 7 is Where Energy Meets Innovation, the Future of Storage, a conversation that sits at the intersection of renewable energy, technology, and long-term sustainability. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Rathin Vyas, CEO and co-founder ENERCO Energy Solutions LLP. He brings over 16 years of specialized experience in renewable energy with deep expertise across solar, wind, solar hybrid, energy storage, and decarbonized strategies. He has advised several leading Indian and global organizations on designing and executing future-ready clean new projects. What sets him apart is his strong blend of global academic exposure and practical ROI-driven execution. He is the alumnus of both Harvard University and University of Cambridge, institutions known for shaping global leaders and cutting-edge thinking, a foundation that clearly reflects in his strategic approach to energy solutions. We are delighted to have him here and share his perspectives on how energy storage will play a defining role in enabling a resilient and sustainable energy future. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Rathin Vyas. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Muskan, for the kind words that you've used. And I would like to thank everyone who's joining in this 7th conversation, Smarter Conversation of AMNS, Magnelis. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad to see we have a good audience here. So yes, the topic is, of course, where energy meets innovation, the future of storage. By brief introduction, I'm Rathin Vyas. Muskan has already given an introduction. I'm one of the founders of ENERCO Energy, a company which I founded in 2009. And in the last 16 years, we have been working with several global companies and Indian companies on enabling them for a cleaner future and a greener future. In the last 16 years, we have assisted companies in reducing almost 1.6 billion units, either through energy optimization or by converting their existing operations into greener operations so that they become more sustainable and are future ready in terms of achieving the green quotient, not just on paper, but in actual operations. We have worked on close to 1200 megawatt of renewables, which includes solar, wind, and wind solar hybrid solutions. Battery energy storage, of course, is one of the recent additions. And I'm quite excited about this domain because this is where solar was back in 2009 when we started up. But solar took a long time to become, I would say, slightly more mature and acceptable. Batteries would take much lesser than that, is what I feel. Here is some of the customers that we have worked with, some very well-known Indian names, some global conglomerates that we are happy to have been associated with. And we continue to offer our services to very popular names like McCain and Bonfigiloli, with whom we are working right now on their projects in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. So that's about us. I would like to now take up the topic of renewable energy and our core topic of battery energy storage system. So we are, of course, one of the global leaders in solar energy. As we all know, we have a cumulative solar capacity of 130 gigawatt, that is 130,000 megawatt, which is a huge feat, I would say, that has been achieved in the last 16 years, because most of these installations have been done in the last 4 to 5 years. Especially, we are seeing a huge traction post-lockdown. Our life has become pre-lockdown and post-lockdown, like we say. So post-lockdown, we have seen a huge quantum jump in terms of solar installations. And of course, majority of these installations are ground-mounted solar plants, which are either CapEx, group captive, or third party. And of course, a lot of grid-connected rooftop solar systems. We work on both of them, and we are only expecting that these numbers will multiply in near future, because we have set a target of 500 gigawatt by 2030 for total renewables, which includes both solar and wind. But of course, as the number suggests, solar is going to be the leader for at least the foreseeable future that we are looking at. We are the third largest in solar power capacity globally. We are behind only US and China. And with the kind of growth that we are seeing, very soon we would also be number two in terms of the solar power capacity, making us one of the leaders in installed capacity, as well as in having capacity for not just for use in India, but also as part of the global energy, I would say the combination that we're looking at, where we are talking about one world and one grid. So that is one initiative that India has taken up. So definitely India is poised to take up a leadership role in that particular area. Now, if you see the concentration for almost 70 to 80% of open access solar projects are in these four states, which are of course all in the western region. When we talk about open access capacity, we are talking about projects which are done on the ground or ground mounted systems, and then the power is being transferred to the industries or to the commercial entities which are located further away from the ground where it is being installed. It is no surprise that Rajasthan is leading the race because of obvious reasons, the high solar radiation and also very supportive policies. In fact, it is one of the first states to have come up with the storage policy as well, which I'll be discussing in a few slides from now. And of course, Gujarat and Maharashtra and Karnataka are the leaders because a lot of industries, these are all industrial states. And of course, industries have, two or three aspects. One is, of course, reduction in power costs through renewable energy. And secondly, of course, there are certain mandates that we have in place, either through the local regulations or the governments. And then the third regulation, which is if you're an export-oriented unit, nowadays the customers have become very much conscious of how much green is a particular vendor. So if someone is exporting to the EU or the USA, there is a mandate that that particular vendor has to show some kind of efforts in going green. So it's no surprise that the industrial states are leading. Of course, Tamil Nadu is another leader in industry, and in fact was one of the pioneers in open access projects when wind power was quite active way back in 2000, early 2000. But yes, the idea is that these are the states who are dominating the solar space as of now, as far as open access is concerned. As far as distributed energy or rooftop solar is concerned, almost all the states are now very much actively taking it up, thanks to PM Surya Ghar Yojana, which is helping a lot of residentials also to go for solar. Even small scale projects like 1 kilowatt, 2 kilowatt are adding, like drops of water in the ocean. But they are very important because cumulatively, when India goes green, all these small projects will also play a key role. As I was mentioning, corporate decarbonization is becoming a very big subject. Because of regulations, one. Secondly, because of the requirements by the customer. So we are seeing a lot of traction in that particular aspect or that particular area where manufacturing companies are actually looking at alternatives for alternatives of the grid power. So there are states which have come up with a new, I would say, mechanism where if you're not able to directly procure green power, the state grid offers you an option to procure green power directly from the state grid at an additional cost. I'm sure you might have heard of how Adani is also doing it in Mumbai for residential consumers, where you have an option that, of course, if you're a residential consumer, let's say, and if you're staying in a society of 100 odd apartments, you cannot have a dedicated rooftop space because the rooftop is a joint property of the apartment. But you have an option to go green to show your commitment towards the planet by opting for a green energy, by paying a premium amount and ensuring that that power, whatever that you're consuming in your house, is a green power. So similar to that, in Madhya Pradesh also now the DISCOM is offering green power as an alternative if you're not able to procure green power through another power purchase agreements and so on and so forth. So the point I'm making is that corporate decarbonization is a reality, and it is now very actively pursued by manufacturing companies and especially MNCs which are coming to India. If you would have seen the client list that I was showing, you would have seen a lot of MNCs that are manufacturing in India, and they have this corporate mandate from their HQ that they have to go for 100% green energy. So that's another aspect that you need to look at. When we look at 100% green energy, there's an initiative called RE100. You can just Google it up and you'll get the list of all the companies that are registered under RE100. In RE100, the corporates have been given a deadline. They have given themselves a deadline that by year so and so, we will procure our entire power from green energy. So that is called as RE100 initiative, and we are working with a few corporates on that, on how to achieve the RE100 despite all the regulatory hurdles. And a lot of corporates have a vision of achieving the same by 2030, 2032. I was watching a video of Apple's senior vice president, and she was saying that the supply chain that they have, the carbon footprint that they have, 70% of the carbon footprint is in their supply chain. So they're heavily dependent on their vendor going green to ensure that they are becoming carbon neutral. Because the balance 30% they've already taken care of. So Apple is already green by 30%. And one of the top vendors who's working in India, I won't reveal the name because of confidentiality reasons, we're working with them. They have a target of RE100 because of these norms set out by Apple. So corporate decarbonization is one of the key driving factors for solar open access. So far we discussed about renewable energy and solar open access. And now I'll come to the core theme, which is battery energy storage system, BESS, and why it's becoming very important. What are the areas or the applications that we have, and what are the government initiatives, and what the commercials look like. So if you see, as I mentioned, battery energy storage system is right now where solar was in 2009-10. Whenever I used to go to any factory or any plant and I used to talk about solar, they would just think that, oh, is there such a system which exists? Why do we need it? Maximum people would say, okay, it's used for water heating, right? And I would say, no, you can even generate power using solar photovoltaic, because at that time, solar photovoltaic was rarely used in street lamps or some emergency lights, but nobody thought that it could be used in utility scale. Now, coming back to BESS, it is somewhat similar, but although with the fact that it is maturing and accelerating at a much faster pace than what solar was. So let's say if solar took about 10, 12 years to become mainstream, BESS will do that in less than half of the time because of various reasons, like I said, about decarbonization. All the nations have come forward and we're talking about net zero. Second, about technology, rapid technology evolution that is taking place in battery energy storage system. So if you see how we have been growing from 2023, 2024, and the projections that we are seeing is almost 900 times growth in the next 6 to 7 years. By 2030, 2032, we are talking about huge growth in battery energy storage systems driven by technology innovation, falling costs, government policies, as we'll see in the upcoming slides. In case if anyone has any questions, kindly just put it in the question box and we'll have it answered towards the end of the session, please. So now when we look at the technology, lithium-ion is the clear leader as of now because it has a first mover advantage and it is a well-established technology. Having said that, there are other technologies which are growing at a very rapid rate, and one of them is lithium iron phosphate. And lithium iron phosphate is one of the fastest growing technologies, and it has distinct advantages over lithium ion in terms of longer life cycle, lower cost, and reduced dependence on imports. So because lithium ion, basically lithium ion is NMC, where nickel, manganese, and cobalt are being used, which are of which cobalt and nickel are of course rare elements. So that results in two factors. One is the cost, and second is import dependence. We are heavily dependent on imports. Whereas if you look at lithium iron phosphate, it is not, it doesn't have any cobalt dependence, and it uses abundant materials. So that is the reason that it is growing at a very fast rate. And of course, the safety aspect, which is also playing a key role. The other technologies which are coming up, we'll have a look at the comparative analysis in the upcoming slides, like sodium ion, flow, and solid state. Some of these technologies are still a few years away, but some of them are now starting to make some commercial sense, but with their own limitations, and we'll have a look at them. So when we look at the deployment, here we are looking at solar plus storage, which is leading the charge. And I think it is pretty much obvious for the reasons we know that solar or wind, for that matter, is very intermittent in nature. We know that the sun will rise at 6:30 or 5:30, depending on where you are, and we know that it will set at a particular time. So there's a huge intermittency. It's only available for, let's say, 50% of the time of the day. So how do we handle that? How do we ensure that we get RTC, which is the around-the-clock power, renewable energy? So that is where BESS comes into play. And solar plus storage is the one which is actually leading the charge with 60% deployment seen in solar plus storage. And if you look at the other combinations, we're talking about wind plus storage combination or wind solar hybrid combination, where even one of the technologies or both the technologies is not available, then battery takes over. And then last is, of course, standalone BESS systems. Now, these are growing independent systems which are basically used for ancillary services like frequency regulation, voltage regulation on a very small scale. And they don't have any other role as such, apart from doing the frequency regulation. Some new regulations are coming in Andhra Pradesh for ancillary services for standalone BESS. So could we have the first poll question and get some responses on people, Muskan? I would request people to please answer the poll question so that we can move on. All right. So Okay, 50% grid scale utility, interesting. Okay, because it's the highest market share now. 12% industrial and CI peak shaving, and 38% EV charging infrastructure. Okay, interesting. Right. So moving on. Now, what are the key components that are being used in utility scale BESS? So the battery pack, of course, that becomes the key component, which consists of cells, and that is like I would say the heart of the system, because that's the one which is storing power and getting discharged to provide power, and of course getting charged when energy is available, when power is available. Off gas detection is more of a safety mechanism because as the batteries get old, there could be leakages, there could be aging issues, there could be maintenance issues. In some cases that we've seen that if the batteries are not maintained well, there could be certain gas leakages which need to be taken care of. And of course, fire suppression system, because some of these technologies are prone to, because they have inflammable electrolytes, they are prone to fire hazards. As you would have seen in some of the EVs that are being produced, that suddenly the EV will catch fire. So fire suppression system plays a key role. Rest are more or less of ancillary or accessories, where your battery management system, which actually, of course, is quite important. We should not look at it like that, because that's the one which decides on what kind of discharge mechanism needs to be used, how many batteries need to come into play, and so on and so on. So it's an intelligent system, BMS, that we need to have. And of course, the main control box, inverters, and other electronics as part of this. So now if you see the battery pack, which is the most, I would say, the costliest part of the entire BESS system. And it is somewhat, I keep going back to solar because I'm a renewable guy. If you look at even a renewable project, a solar project, 60 to 65% of the cost is of the modules. And when the module prices started coming down, that's when the projects became more viable. Like I still remember in 2009-10, the projects were costing almost 20 crores per megawatt. And today, if you look at a megawatt scale project, it costs you hardly 3 crores. I'm talking about tier 1 good quality projects. But the component of the cost component or the cost share of photovoltaic modules is largely in line with what we're looking at for battery packs. So the rest of the system, the balance systems, is what is the 35% of the cost. But a major cost is, of course, the battery pack. And that's where all the technology evolution, the economies of scale, and government support is coming into play. Each of the deployment model has a different cost, and I'll explain why. Now, if you look at utility scale grid connected projects, of course, the unit rate is much lesser because of economies of scale, because you already have certain systems which are in place as is required by a battery energy storage system. So that's the one which is the cheapest form right now. And you will see in the recent tenders where utility scale grid connected projects have an edge over other types of projects. The other types of projects are, of course, industrial and commercial usage, where batteries are being used on a very small scale right now in India to actually, I would say, save on peak demand. So in almost all of the states, we have these TOD, right? The time of day kind of tariff. Like in Maharashtra, it is from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 1800 hours to 2200 hours. That's the time when the demand is peak, because all the office goes, they have returned home, the manufacturing is still on, but at an individual level, the power consumption has gone up. So from that time, during those 4 hours in Maharashtra especially, there's a surcharge of 1.5 rupees per unit. Now, if an industry is running during those hours, they can actually shave off, it's called peak shaving. They can shave off that demand by using battery during those critical hours. If not for the entire 4 hours, even if they use it for at least 2 hours, they can actually save on some of their production costs. And standalone remote BESS, of course, very difficult to maintain, and hence they are somewhat costly. And as compared to, of course, utility scale, and they have the highest payback period as well. Now, if you look at the payback period, definitely industrial C&I BESS could make more sense, but that is very subjective. Where we're talking about, which state are we talking about? So as of now, like I said, if you look at industrial states like Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, or Karnataka, there we'll see that a lot of peak shaving clients who would be using BESS to reduce their production cost. Utility scale grid connected always take the cake because they are the ones which are supported by government, and they have economies of scale. So as you'll see now, how utility scale grid connected projects will be helpful, and how they are already driving the prices down. Now, in 2024, the solar and storage tenders which were given out, and the companies which won the bid, it was going at almost 3.5 rupees per kilowatt hour, the LCOE, which is landed cost of energy, of which the cost of BESS was 2.5 crore per megawatt, which is almost equivalent to the cost of solar project, or maybe let's say 80% of the cost of the solar project. So when you're looking at a energy storage system, you're nearly doubling your investment in a particular project. Of course, subject to the number of hours of storage that we're looking at. But the fact is that the costs are now coming down rapidly. So like I said, what took solar maybe 11, 12 years, this could take much lesser than that. And the packs now that we're looking at in the innovation and the cost reduction supported by government initiatives will all play a key role in reducing the battery cost. The government has already announced a 91 billion VGF, which is viability gap funding for BESS capacity. Now, when we talk about viability gap funding, when a particular project is not viable on its own merits for savings, then it depends on certain viability gap funding. And that is what is VGF, and the government supports and comes in to fill in the gap to ensure that the technology progress is not hampered. Second initiative that the government has taken is interstate transmission charge waiver. So what this means is when you talk about any project, a large-scale project, let's say a solar project in Rajasthan could supply power to a consumer in Tamil Nadu, let's say, right? So there is one is the intrastate transmission that will happen, that is in Rajasthan, and then there will be interstate between Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu, which will be a transmission charge plus the other charges that will come in. So whenever we talk about interstate, that is a central government subject and the CERC takes over. Whereas if it is intrastate within the state, that's a state subject. So the government has the CTU, the Central Transmission Unit, from where it controls the interstate transmissions. And hence, they have decided till June 2028, if there are any BESS projects across India supplying power from one state to the other, then they will be waiving off the interstate transmission charges, which is a very big move. And we are hoping that this might be extended a bit, but still we have good 2.5 years from now, even if we start looking at all these schemes. 18,000 crore PLI, which is the production linked incentive scheme, where we are looking at 50 gigawatt hour of advanced chemistry cell batteries. So basically it's known as ACC, advanced chemistry cell batteries. The government is saying that, okay, you set up a particular project for manufacturing of these cells and batteries, and then you will be given a certain incentive, production linked incentive for these schemes. 2-3 companies have already established it. In fact, Ola is also in the process. Ola Electric, which is popularly the taxi hailing app. Now they are also entering into battery manufacturing. So they have been given certain extension. And the fourth is, of course, now these are all incentives. Now comes the obligation part. So the government is expecting that by 28 or by 29, battery technology would mature. And so to ensure that, even if it doesn't mature, they need to have certain kind of obligation, like how we had renewable energy obligation, renewable purchase obligation. Now there is a mandate of 4% energy storage obligation. So any new projects that will come up, they will need to have a certain part of their energy to be stored in batteries. Now, the Rajasthan government has done something different. What they are doing is something quite interesting. So their policy said that earlier that, let's say if you have a contract demand of 10 MVA, you could go for an open access project of 10 megawatt, which is equivalent to your contract demand. Now with the new policy, what they're saying, that if you have a 10 MVA contract demand, you could go up to you could go up to 2x your contract demand for open access project, because we all know that whether it is solar, whether it is wind, they won't be generating 100% of the time. So whenever you have a lesser contract demand, you can actually go for higher capacity project. So Rajasthan government has said that if you are going for if you have a contract demand of 10 MVA, you can go for a 20 megawatt project, provided that 20% of that is especially in storage. So if you're looking at 10 megawatt, 10 MVA contract demand, 20 megawatt project, and 20% of the 20 megawatt, that is 4 megawatt, has to be in storage. So they are actually trying to incentivize you and at the same time have technology progress. But the storage obligation is definitely there, which will necessarily obligate, have an obligation on any producer or developer to have some part of their power on storage. And it is not that the government is just leading, they're leading by example, not just by obligation and by funding. But if you look at even the government tenders, there's a strong shift towards storage. Now, most of the government tenders that are coming in, they are all talking about storage. It is not just about, okay, I need to generate power. It is that you have to generate power, you have to store it so that when the renewable energy is not available, whether it is solar, whether it is wind, at that time, you have to ensure that the power supply is, it is not drastically cut off. There could be grid issues, right? There could be a lot of frequency related issues. So to avoid those kind of issues, now almost all the tenders that the government is coming up with storage solutions only. The sad news is that not most of these projects have not been commissioned as yet. But the good part is that it's a large pipeline, so it's a huge opportunity for battery energy storage system suppliers and the key players, and even the EPC companies who are working in this field to actually come up, and execute these projects. And we are seeing some good traction, as you'll see in a couple of slides about the projects that are already commissioned or some are under commissioning. Yeah, could we have the second poll question before we move forward, please? Okay, so 47% domestic battery manufacturing. Okay, yeah, that's true, because there's a lot of stress on Make in India, and with less reliance and less dependence on imports. So domestic battery manufacturing definitely will be one of the primary drivers. That's right. Okay, moving on. So beyond storage, as I was discussing, what are the other areas, like the ancillary services that we were talking about, is frequency regulation. There are a lot of times issues which could result in, because one is of course the inherent nature of renewables, that suddenly if we are heavily reliant on solar, then after sunset there could be issues with frequency, because suddenly there'll be a drop, and we have witnessed it. There have been great downtimes, not just in India but in Europe as well. To avoid such situations, frequency regulation is one key area where storage can play a very big role, because it has hardly milliseconds in operation. We can just switch it on and switch it off. Same way it goes for voltage support. Peak shaving, I just explained how consumers, industrial consumers and commercial consumers, can actually reduce their cost of production or their cost of power by ensuring that if they switch on storage during those peak hours, they can reduce their cost. And black start capability, restoring grid after outages, the generators could take some time to really power up the grids. And battery has one big advantage, huge advantage, that it can start off in milliseconds. So black start capability is one another aspect. And as we are seeing some of the states now coming up with ancillaries as a service for storage. Now, this is something which is quite interesting. And when you look at the growth where we are in 2025 and how it is expected to grow from here, that apart from, of course, renewable firming, which we spoke about, RTC, the around the clock power, and the grid service and peak shaving, EV charging is also playing a key role. Of course, EVs have not picked up much as of now, but we are expecting a gradual pickup in a couple of years from now, when people are more confident about the quality of storage, the infrastructure that we'll have, the charging infrastructure which will take place. So EVs will also play a key role in addition to the grid services which we spoke about, and also about the renewable RTC, that is round the clock power. So there will be diversified services, and we can, when we talk about battery, it shouldn't just be that, okay, we'll use battery as a power backup. Of course, that is its key usage, but there are applications beyond storage that BESS has. I just want to touch upon a few of the technologies that are working well, not just in India, but overseas as well. But as of now, our focus is more on India. So LFP and lithium ion is something which is now dominating the market. But because of their, I would say, dependence, or lithium ion dependence on nickel, manganese, and cobalt, we have to rely on something which is more abundant. And sodium ion is one of the most promising technologies that looks like. Although it has its own challenges, which I'll come to, but the good part is it is abundant, so we don't have any import dependence. And then, of course, the flow battery, vanadium redox flow battery, it has its challenges with regards to the storage, because it is quite heavy. But that's another emerging technology. In addition to solid state batteries, which are still a few years away, and lithium sulfur, where already some R&D is going on, with between the government universities. So this is one interesting table that I think one should have a look at: lithium ion NCM, and that is the one which is leading. When we talk about energy density, there is no comparison to lithium ion as on date, and that's the reason that it is one of the most popular technologies dominating the space. It has a decent safety record, although there are other technologies which are better. It has a decent cycle life, and it has a slightly higher cost. And that's where LFP comes in, lithium iron phosphate. And lithium iron phosphate, although the energy density is much lesser, but it gives you a distinct advantage of higher cycle life, better safety, and lesser cost. So LFP is now coming up as the next big thing because of these reasons, followed by sodium ion. Of course, the cost is nearly 50% of NCM or NMC, which is lithium ion. The cycles are reduced, but it has excellent safety record, It can be produced indigenously in India. And the challenge, of course, is the reduced energy density. So you require more space. Basically, when you talk about energy density, you require more space. But considering the safety aspects, considering the cost, it looks quite promising in the, I would say, short to medium term. Of course, it also depends on the application. Like, for example, it might not be, I would say, applicable for EVs, for example. But let's say if we're talking about large-scale utility-scale storage, then sodium ion is something that is a technology that needs to be looked at seriously. Then we talk about VRFB, vanadium redox flow, where we're talking about reduction and oxidation in the same process. It's a totally different kind of process, but it's quite bulky. As you can see, the energy density is the lowest. It has its own challenges because it uses electrolytes flowing through batteries. But the part is that, it is quite costly because vanadium, again, is, although it is quite available abundantly, but the global prices keep on fluctuating. So the current cost is very, very high, but it offers excellent storage from duration point of view, even though it is quite bulky in nature. Solid state is something which is still some time away, but I just thought I'll include that as part of the table for discussion, where it has it actually surpasses everyone, all the other technologies in terms of energy density, in terms of cycle life. Of course, it's behind VRFB, but otherwise, it for the kind of compact offering that it gives, it has an excellent safety record. But of course, the price is quite high, and it is still piloting. It is not commercially available. That is still some time away. Where we are, so the why it's called solid state is because instead of using electrolytes, it is using solid, material as the medium to flow, rather than having any liquid. So as far as R&D is concerned, we are quite ahead because IIT Bombay, IISc Bangalore, and CSIR Chennai, as we just saw, they're already working on lithium sulfur with Tel Aviv University. So this is the kind of ecosystem that we're working in right now, supported by government's PLI scheme of 18,000 crores for advanced chemical cell batteries to encourage indigenous manufacturing, where we have set a target of 50 gigawatt hour by 2030. So now if you see, the timelines are quite compact. We're not talking about something which is like 10, 15 years down the line. We are talking about something like 4 years down the line. I mean, we are towards the end of 2025 almost. So we're talking about something 4 years down the line. So the timeline is compacted, and which is quite encouraging, because now we are looking at something which is in the foreseeable future rather than something which is far, far off. So these are some of the key projects, landmark projects that are currently operational or under construction. I'll give a few more details as we move ahead. This is just to give you a bird's eye view of how many consumers are being served by a particular project and how much of carbon dioxide has been avoided. So Rajnandgaon, Chhattisgarh project has been done by SECI. The Delhi project has been done by BEC's Rajdhani. And the Morena solar storage, which is still under construction, it will be done, it's done in two parts. One is done by Acme Solar. We'll have a look at each of these projects in the upcoming slides. So if you look at the market size and projections, definitely India is definitely going to be a global leader, how it has now become a global leader in renewable energy. We are also going to become a global leader in storage. When we talk about global leadership, we're talking about across supply chain. We're talking about batteries, indigenous development of batteries. We're talking about deployment of batteries across various applications that we have seen today. We are talking about regulations. There'll be one point in key takeaway which I'll come to, which is very interesting, which is a very interesting concept. You all understand net metering, how net metering works. Whenever you have excess power, you give it back to the grid. Something similar is coming up in batteries. I'll come to that point. So there's a huge market opportunity for key players in battery, whether you are an EPC company, whether you are a solution provider. There's a huge projection that we need to, appreciate as far as the Indian market is concerned. So time for the last poll of the day. Could we have the poll, please? And then we come to the concluding slides. Great. So, wow. So majority of the people think that 2030 and beyond is what when we can consider the market as matured and still evolving. Okay. And rest 25% are quite optimistic, and 19% say that okay, mid-cycle clarity. And less 7% say never, it's continuous disruption expected. Actually, yeah, that's true. My views are that, if you look at the still evolving part, I definitely agree. Because, like I said, if you're talking about something which is matured, means that technology has been accepted, commercially available, and a disruption has been made, and everyone is going for that. So that's when we talk about maturity, like how solar is right now, where wind was in early 2000s. So as far as that is concerned, I would say that continuous disruption is expected, no doubt about it. We'll keep on evolving. And I'd like to draw parallels here. See, when we started with solar in India in 2010, 2011, that time in India, most of the projects were using polycrystalline, right? And thin films, which were being used. Now, since then, we have come a long way because that time the panels were of almost 220 watt peak, 240 watt peak. Today, we are talking about bifacial top cone panels, which are 600 watt peak, right? And in between, we also had monopore. So there is a continuous evolution which happens. But there comes a time period when the technology is matured, where the market trusts in the technology. So I would say that yes, definitely by 28, 29, there would be definite mid-cycle clarity, although there will be disruption and continuous evolution, but battery will become mainstream. I feel that by 28 or by 29, batteries will definitely become mainstream and as part of renewable energy projects, which we're already seeing in tendering. So going back to the presentation, this is the market evolution that we are looking at, starting from 2 billion 2024 base and going right up to PLI manufacturing and the market size of nearly $30 billion in 2030. As you can see, of course, government mandates are something which will play a key driving factor, which is a key driving factor for the growth of the market size. So as we just talking about EV, as I said that I'll talk about one interesting point. So far, almost 2 million EVs have been sold in India. And of course, battery is essential for fast charging networks and peak load management. So vehicle to grid integration, which will enable bidirectional power flow. So what happens is that how we have net metering for industries and commercial users and educational institutes, where if you have if you're generating more than your requirement, you can feed that power to the grid and take it back from the grid whenever you require. Similar to that is V2G, vehicle to grid integration. So suppose if you have a parked vehicle, right, and you know that you won't use the battery for some time, you can actually supply power to the grid, right, and get some incentive out of it. And when you are ready to move, you can get the power and charge your batteries at a lower tariff. So the V2G integration is still some time away, but I do see it coming in as soon as we cross a certain threshold of, I would say, 10 or 15 million EVs in India. That's the time when V2G integration, bidirectional power flow, will come into picture. And that's why EV charging infrastructure is one of the key drivers as well. Grid stability through distributed energy storage networks, like I said, for vehicle to grid integration, and also for charging EVs. As I already mentioned, the advanced chemistry cell battery production, we already have a 50 gigawatt hour target by PLI support. The first ingot wafer facility, that is for solar cells, that we are looking at, a 2 gigawatt line has already been established. The goal, of course, is to reduce import dependence and establish India as a battery hub and as a renewable energy hub, which comprises of the entire supply chain. Now, talking about the three key projects, landmark projects that we have seen in Chhattisgarh and New Delhi, and one which is under construction coming up in MP. So if you look at the two projects which have been commissioned already, they both have used LFP technology, right? And they are supported by the government because they have to, of course, give some kind of viability gap funding. So one project has been operational for more than a year now, and another one has been about a few months now. And the cost, if you see, is something which is quite interesting because that's where India is actually leading by reducing the cost, not just deploying technology, but deploying technology at record cost is what we actually achieve, strive for and aim. Although now the new project is using lithium ion, the previous two have used LFP batteries because LFP is generally cheaper than lithium ion. But lithium ion has better energy storage capacity, as we have seen the energy density. So the project closed at a record low of 2.7 rupees per unit. Now this project is divided in two phases, and it has almost 800 megawatt hour of storage, and the project size is 600 megawatt in three phases on the solar side, and on storage side it's in two phases. This is under development in Madhya Pradesh, and it is again done by RUMS, which is Reva Ultra Megawatt Solar Limited, which is the one which is supplying power to Delhi Metro. And one of the phases has been done by Acme Solar, which is a very well-known name in solar EPC and development. So the challenges and opportunities, of course, grid connectivity delays. I was just reading about such delays happening in Rajasthan, where even the renewable energy developers are asked to shut down the projects when there are no infrastructure issues. Either when the grid is not available, they don't delay, they don't approve the project, or when after the project has been commissioned, then there are issues with infrastructure. So that's one key challenge we are anticipating similar challenges in battery energy storage as well. Execution risk, that goes without saying. That's the case with almost all kinds of new projects or new technologies that we look at. Land availability, yes, of course. But here what happens is, as against solar or wind, where you require certain kind of area, the land area, like 3 acres is the benchmark for solar now. That kind of facility may not be necessarily required because you can stack it up in batteries. You can have a compact battery space and PPA signing delays. So these are the usual challenges that are there for any kind of projects in India. Opportunities, as we have seen, the battery costs are rapidly coming down. Government is keen to have hybrid project dominance for round-the-clock power and corporate PPA, which we discussed initially about the decarbonisation, corporate decarbonization mandate, and policy clarity. Of course, some states, like I said, like Rajasthan, they already have good policy clarity. So that is something of an opportunity which one should capitalize on. So the key takeaways: renewable plus storage, or rather I would say solar plus storage, emerging as India's preferred model. The projected growth by 2032 shows that there's an immense market potential. The trend that we are seeing in tendering, the government tenders, where now most of the projects, in fact, this is 2024 number, but in 2025, we are seeing almost 55 to 60% of the tenders are having some basic requirement of storage as part of the offering. Cost reduction, of course, driving economic viability. I think that will be a key factor, because India is a very price-sensitive market, and unless until the price comes down, that is something the exponential growth that we are anticipating may not happen. Corporate decarbonization, as I mentioned, because of various reasons, people now want to look at operations as a more sustainable and green operation. So there are opportunities at various levels. EPC and developer opportunity, as we talked about, 50 gigawatt capacity pipeline, which is now already there, already has been tendered. PLI schemes for battery makers, 18,000 crores is what the government, the layout has been, the financial layout. Technology integration. So BS expertise, now that is where we come in, because we offer expertise in integration of such technologies, and forecast, which also plays a key role, because you need to understand the grid availability, the grid integration. There are a lot of challenges which come into play. So the technology integration becomes a very key aspect, where ENERCO is working with a lot of consumers and also with the government grid companies. We have seen the geographic focus, but of course, these are the priority markets. That doesn't mean that other markets are not important, but these are the four areas which will actually be the leaders: Gujarat, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, and Karnataka, where geographically we have seen a lot of renewable energy projects coming up. And this is the roadmap of key milestone, where, as I mentioned, that of course it will be maturing over a period of time, but gradually the ramping up of factories, the hybrid tenders reaching almost 70% in the next 1 year, and market maturity in the next 2 to 3 years, and of course scaling up to the targets that the government has set up. This will also make India a global tech hub, not just a cheap power supplier, but also a global tech hub. And that's how we look at things shaping up from now for the next 6 to 7 years. I would like to also talk a bit about AMNS India, who are the sponsors of this event, and I must thank them for having this webinar on interesting subject. As you know, AMN is a global name now, and we of course we are proud that it's an Indian company which is now having a global footprint, and they also have of course excellent footprint in India after they've acquired SR and other companies, steel companies. And as you would have seen in the previous video, they have come up with an excellent product, which is an all-weather product, which also has application in solar industry, which is a patented zinc, aluminum, magnesium alloy. If you have any questions regarding the same, you may also kindly reach out to us, and I'll have someone answer that for you. If you have anything to do with renewable energy and batteries, please reach out to us in the question section, and you get those questions answered. As I mentioned, solar structures is one of the key applications for Magnelis, in addition to, of course, several other applications, as you could see here. That's it from my side. You can reach out to me on the coordinates given here. Muskan, should we have any questions from anyone, or?
Yes, sir, there are a few questions. I'll just first is that, can you please explain briefly about standalone BESS?
Okay, so standalone BESS basically means that where we're talking about that there are no renewable energy projects that are generating energy, or there might be, but they have got nothing to do with the grid. They are standalone. They are away from the grid, Let's say I'll give you an example, classic example of, let's say, in Ladakh, where the grid may not be available in a certain remote area, or a northeast village in northeast. There, if the grid is not available, you have to be completely independent. So you will have a standalone system where solar is generating during the daytime and also charging the batteries, and then you can use those batteries at night for off-grid system. That is one type of standalone system. The other type of standalone system is you just have batteries, nothing else. So how do you charge those batteries? Is by using various sources. It could even be non-renewable sources for that matter. But again, it's a standalone system. And third type of standalone system is the one where it is being used for grid regulation, which I was talking about, the 4% that we are looking at for regulating the frequency, the voltage, and other aspects. So this is what a standalone BESS is all about.
So the next question in the chat box is, from a grid operator's perspective, where does BESS add more value today? RTS power, peak shaving, or ancillary services?
Oh, I would say that RTC power is the one which is something which takes the cake by miles. See, as a grid operator, what do I want? I don't want unpredictability in generation. I need to have certain kind of certainty in having, forecasting how much power will be generated, how much power has to be distributed. So there are state load dispatch centers. So from a grid operator's perspective, I need to have certain kind of assurance that, okay, I am going to get this much of power with reasonable accuracy, 80 to 90%. So RTC, that is round the clock power, is something which is very crucial from a grid operator's perspective. Peak shaving, of course, it happens, especially it can be seasonal, because let's say if there's a season of lull period when solar or wind both are not available, then peak shaving also plays a key role. But if you, and ancillary services, as I mentioned, like now Andhra Pradesh is coming up with a tender, they're saying that you need to have certain ancillary services to support the grid. So if I look at numbers, I would say RTC power, round the clock power, would be about 70 to 80%. Peak shaving will be about another 10 to 12%, and balance single-digit percent would be ancillary services.
Is there a risk that faster, cheaper innovations like sodium ion or even solid state will stand today's LFP-based BESS investments?
So they make redundant. Okay, no, okay, I get it. See, I'll tell you what. Generally, these are all long-term agreements, right? There are long-term arrangements, long-term agreements that are there as part of the government commitments. So let's say when I was talking about the cost for solar, 10, 15 years back, at that time, the government had signed the power purchase agreement at a higher rate. So they fulfilled their commitment, because they signed it up at a particular rate for 25 years, they had to fulfill those commitments. So if, let's say tomorrow, if a cheaper technology comes up, which is a major disruption in the market, it will not leave these assets stranded. I think that's the word that they use, right? Stranded. So it won't use them, it won't leave them stranded. Rather, they will continue to be the pioneers, the first leaders, and the government will honor the commitments through the power purchase agreements that are being made, even as the cost keeps on falling. So I don't think that is likely to happen, because we have seen it earlier that it doesn't happen in renewable energy projects.
So there's this one last question. From a grid, how real is the sodium ion story for grid scale storage in India, and then could it actually impact the BESS economics?
Right. Actually, like I said, I'm quite upbeat about sodium ion, primarily because it doesn't use any kind of rare element, or it doesn't use any kind of elements that India is dependent on China or any other country for imports. Sodium is abundantly available. It is already 20 to 30% cheaper than lithium ion or LFP technology. The only challenge it has is, of course, the energy density. But if you look at storage for utility scale power plants, sodium ion is one excellent choice that we would be actually looking at. And I feel that when it could actually impact, it's anyone's guess. Well, but like I said, we'll start seeing some results as early as 2026, when the first sodium ion project will get commissioned in India. Once that is done, I think we should have better answers 12 months from now about how viable the sodium ion story would be for India.
Thank you, sir, for those valuable insights and breaking down the evolving role of energy storage in such a clear and strategic manner. Your perspective on innovation, stability, and long-term value creation has given us a lot to reflect on. Thank you as well to our audience for their active participation and thoughtful engagement throughout the session. This brings us to the close of Smarter Conversations Webinar 7, presented by Magnelis and EMNS India. We look forward to continuing these conversations with more industry leaders and future-focused topics in the upcoming sessions of Smarter Conversations. Until then, stay connected, stay curious, and keep building smarter conversations. Have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Muskan. Thank you, everyone.